the Carolina Hurricanes. Mike Maniscalco, Canes play-by-play, Bally Sports, joining us now here on Ovies and Giglio. What are you drinking there, Mike?
Coffee.
Oh, you're not going brown liquor like I did at 8:42 in the first podcast episode?
I could if you want me to.
I mean, why not? It's a podcast. We don't have to worry about FCC rules anymore, man. Actually, do you need I'm surprised it's not tea, considering that you about lost your voice on that OT winner in the last series on Thursday night, man. It was from the diaphragm. You let it out, man. That was a lot of fun.
When you get an OT winner, it's got to come from the soul. That's what I believe. So I'm fortunate, honestly, in my brief run. I've had 5 OT winners in the playoffs that I've called. Jordan Staal. In 2019, I got to take over for the radio gig because it was a simulcast. They just put off to that. And the first game I ever called was an OT winner, Jordan Staal. And then you go to the Nashville series, Jordan Staal again. And then Sebastian Aho, but we were calling it off of a monitor. So I can totally sympathize with Joe Bowen, the Toronto play-by-play voice, who was getting a little bit of heck. Not his fault when you're calling it off of a monitor and you're waiting for a replay.
Yeah.
You get what you can get. And then Jesper Fast with an OT winner. I think I might have more than that. And then another winner from Jesper Fast and OT. In fact, I do. I think I've got like 6 or 7 now. I've lost track. They just do it so often. When the Canes go to overtime, the game is over, right? Everybody knows this. The game 7-0 right now.
Yeah. Although, Joe, you had a stat where it's got to be single, right? It's got to be a single.
No, none of those multiple overtime games. You don't want any of those.
Correct.
Those become a problem. Yeah. But, Mike, let's talk a little bit about the Florida Panthers, because I remember going to a game last season when they were just blazing hot, blasting through the NHL. And Joe and I were arguing about, here are the Canes piddling along. And I'm like, this is the team you want to look like. This is what you want to be. And sure enough, they end up losing they lost in the playoffs. They're gone as the President's Trophy. But Paul Maurice comes in, so you have a different coach. And then they made a significant trade, with Huberdeau going to Calgary, Tkachuk coming in. And I think it took them basically all regular season, and correct me if I'm wrong here, to figure out how to kind of reconfigure who they were. And then obviously they lost Giroux too, a guy who they made a deal. Everybody wants to make deals at the deadline. They picked up Giroux, who ends up, signing with a different team. I think he goes to Ottawa. So it's not the same team that we saw last year. And I'm still trying to wrap my brain around that. But I still think they're probably more talented than your normal 8th seed or last team into the bracket, right?
No, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up last year, Joe, because everybody has conveniently forgotten how good this team was last year. And losing Claude Giroux, who they signed, they made the trade for from Philly last year, as they tried to push their chips in the middle of the table. And again, that we could do a topic on, for everybody's like, we got to make moves at the deadline. Show me the last team that made a major move at the trade deadline, giving up a ton of assets, and it paid
just
off.
At me, Mike. Just at me, because I was that person. Like, they got $10 million. Put the hammer down. Let's go. Let's go get it, dude.
Joe, I wanted to congratulate you on your unbelievable season coaching the Miami Dolphins. I don't want to bring up anything else. I'm not here to throw shade, although evidently where I've set up for this interview, I'm in the shadiest spot of my house. I don't know how that happened.
It's fine.
But no, to that point, Giglio, this is still a good Florida team. And it's funny, the last game of the year, the Hurricanes, Florida needed to win to make sure that they got into the playoffs. The Hurricanes needed to win to make sure they won the Metro Division and had the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. But we were talking to Paul Maurice about it. And, hey, when did it start to click? And he goes, look, new coach, big trade, room's different. Things take time for the plan to come together. But if you take a look around middle of January, the Panthers got it. Because last year they were run and gun, and they had a weird year last year with the whole Joe Quenneville situation and what happened in Chicago, and he had to lose his job, and Andrew Burnett took over. And Andrew Burnett, first year head coach at any level, kind of let the players have the freedom to do what they want to do. That's why you saw this team that was so fast and going up the ice and scoring goals. But then Paul Maurice gets brought in to bring structure to the game. Hey, that doesn't work in the playoffs. And he said around January, it really all fell into place for this team. And then they've gotten to that point. And we've talked about this, guys, in other lifetimes. Goaltending matters. And they right now have good Sergei Bobrovsky. And when you have the good Sergei Bobrovsky, you've got a chance of winning anybody who you play against. And that's been the case. And it's funny, take a look. They beat Boston, they beat Toronto, these two running gun teams, and they beat them by being able to lock them down a little bit. So this is by no means, guys, and I'll go on record, this is not a short series. Neither one of these teams is winning this series in 4 or 5 games. This is going 6. The question is, will it go 7?
Well, Mike Maniscalco hanging out with us here. I don't think the Canes are capable of really making short series either, just from kind of like the nature of the way that they play. It's on depth. No. Let's be honest about that last game, okay? Let's be honest about the last game. Yes, they just had one, but it went to overtime. I mean, coming off of the wildness of how they were just scoring at will on a shaky goaltender situation in New Jersey, I was somewhat surprised they did not kind of continue the same thing at home. That's my point. I will say this about Florida, though. They are older and the run and gun and all that stuff that you mentioned, but you could make the argument that the Hurricanes and the way that they play and they keep just once they kind of get in that mode, I don't think that Florida can keep up. I'm not sure they can. Beyond that, goaltending aside, I don't think they can. I think the Canes and the way that they play is completely different from how Boston and Toronto is playing. And to Joe's point about how second round vibes are different. I mean, it's one. You got the curse of the President's Trophy, but you also had Toronto coming off the, oh my goodness, we finally did this. Now what? Like, what do we do? And Florida took advantage of that. I don't think that the Hurricanes are in that kind of mode. I think this is one of those 5 years of buildup, an experienced team, a veteran team that understands the opportunity that's in front of them. I mean, I'm sure when you talk to these guys, they understand the opportunity that's in front of them. And I don't see Rod Brind'Amour letting that room let go of that fact.
No, and the room won't let go of that fact either. No. And I think that's part of it. You know, I don't know where you guys side on, you know, the process in pro sports, and after what happened to 76ers, maybe
not the 76ers.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't say that. But I do think that there is, at some point when you have a young core of players who go through what the Canes have done, not what Toronto has done, where it's first round and out, but 2019, they go to the conference final. You know, this is, again, the only team in the NHL the last 5 years to win a postseason series. I have to say that because the NHL doesn't want us to call what the first round of the bubble playoff games, but whatever it was, they're playoff stats, but they weren't playoff games. That's a whole nother thing that podcasters get into. But they're the only team to have won a series 5 consecutive years. The only team to do that. But there's points to it. You know, you beat Nashville, you go to the second round, then you play the 2-time champion Tampa Bay Lightning, and you see how they play, and you're like, oh, that's different. You know, when they played Boston, oh, that's different. And you file those things in the memory banks. And now this group with the pieces they have, and I'm not talking about Jordan Staal or even Brent Burns. This is Sebastian Aho, Jacob Slavin, Brett Pesce, those guys who they've built around. Marty Necas to a degree. Those guys who have come through the system, who kind of won in either the minors or have gone through this process, they now look and go, okay, this is what it takes. You know, Jersey looks like them a few years ago. That's one of the comparisons that I always got. I'm like, oh, Jersey's not as tight defensively, but I get what people are talking about, a young group that's got to go through it. Well, this is the wiser group now, and we'll see how that plays out. The one thing, though, this Florida team, when you got a guy like Alexander Barkov, and then you've got Matthew Tkachuk up front, and then they have these other pieces, it's going to be tough. But I just think, again, the Canes are not going to go, oh, well, we're in the conference finals. Yay, let's, crack out the champagne.
Right.
No. The goal is to get past this point. And they all know it. Nobody in that room is patting anybody on the back. And seeing this as a podcast, I would use the Winston Wolfe line from Pulp Fiction. When they got the cars clean, let's not.
Yeah. I already cursed once on today's podcast. I don't want to tick off the News and Observer already. So let's chill out. So.
But no, I'm putting it like that room. There is not an iota of satisfaction with what they've done. Enjoyment, yes, but no satisfaction.
speaking of pieces of the Panthers, Eric Staal is one of them. Joe and I opened this podcast, and I said, best hockey player. Let's not get into any other stuff. Eric Staal is the best hockey player to play for the Carolina Hurricanes franchise. Where do you fall on that argument?
If we did the vote right now, yeah, I'd have a hard time not voting him in the top three. I think Rod Brind'Amour overall as a player. I mean, we can put this into different sections like best drafted player.
Yeah, sure.
For my money, for the player who the Canes drafted, yeah. But Rod Brind'Amour, Ron Francis are for me 1 and 2 talent wise for this team. But right up there is Jacob Slavin. He doesn't have the sexy numbers. Sebastian Aho is on this list. But you know what's the good thing about it now? And I don't want to seem like I'm a shill here for the organization, but there's a history. You can actually have a debate of it. Where I think a few years ago, Joe, if we were talking about this, I could say Brind'Amour, Francis, Staal, and those are the 3 that we're voting on, and that's it. Now you can add a couple more names, but
this is where we get into the intangibles, though, right? Because I could make it, and to your point, you're absolutely right. It's awesome and appropriate, I think, that the Hurricanes are playing the Florida Panthers, a team that features a former coach 2 times over and a former captain who's part of a Stanley Cup run. It all part of their 25th anniversary season. And we can have this debate because I don't think it's a controversial thing to say that his brother, Jordan Staal, has been more impactful with what this iteration of the Canes is post 2006 Staal. And it's really no fault of his own. There's all sorts of other factors that go into it. But unfortunately for Staal, he was part of some of the dark times for the Carolina Hurricanes, unfortunately, before he finally got traded away. And Staal has been part of a core group that's really helped revitalize what this franchise is. And that's going to elevate him in my book. Yeah.
I mean, again, I think the good part about that question or putting that on the table is there are so many different things that we can point to and say this. I will always come down on the side of Eric Staal to what you just said, Joe. You sometimes you are just in a bad situation. And it's the Canes tried, but it was never like building. It was, okay, we got a hole in a wall here and we got a heater that doesn't work. Which is the best solution? Which should we fix first? And which are we going to not ignore or throw, the least bit of attention to it? They never got the full pieces there. And the one thing for Eric in being around him in that situation, when you talk about intangibles, he cared far more than what people, I think, tried to paint him as the captain. He was far more fiery than people thought he was behind closed doors with what he did. But, again, there's only so much one player can do. It's funny because last night, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl guys get eliminated.
Right.
These are the 2 best players in the world.
Yeah.
And, people today, why can't Connor McDavid win? Well, it takes 17 other guys. It's not just on one guy, and it takes a goalie. And I think Eric, there are a couple of guys in that dark time that you take a look and you say, oh, well, they didn't do this and they didn't do that. Well, it's kind of hard to win when you're just one guy trying to carry. And that sounds unfair when I say that because there were some good groups. But my proof for Eric Staal, when you got to the playoffs, he was there. He wasn't a guy who just put up regular season numbers, although there's only 2 appearances, 06, 09. But I like conversations like this because, again, you want to go intangibles, you want to go what they meant to the franchise, you want to go what they did on the ice. There's so many different avenues to roll down with it.
Mike Maniscalco, play-by-play, Valley Sports. Mike, we appreciate the time. Joe and I are going to make a rare appearance at practice today. How exciting is that?
Oh my goodness!
We got time.
Can't wait to see you guys.
We have time now. We can kind of hang out in the afternoon now. All right, man.
Isn't it fun to? It's guys. Let me not use the word fun. Okay, we'll edit this one.
This is all live to tape, my dude. It's all live to tape.
It's kind of fun. I mean,
it is.
The word would be liberating.
Good point. That's a very good way of putting it. There's a reason why you do play-by-play, Mike. All right, man. We'll talk to you later.